Welcome back to Comedy for Life. My name is Walter Frasier. This is episode 5, Find the Funny, part 2. We've been through getting stage time, brainstorming ideas, brainstorming details, finding the funny through the performance, the way you shape through changing dynamics of attitude, timing, pace, rhythm, volume, pitch, no, right? Moving the story around just with the shape of it. Today, we're going to talk about shaping the content itself, manipulating the content. This is more about how to think like a comic, but it's also a way to take the routine you've got, finding ways to punch it up, finding ways to make it funnier, finding ways to make it crisper. So, first of all, we're going to talk about economy of words. 90% of the students I work with, they have way too much setup and very little payoff. They have 2 minutes of this is kind of what you need to know to make this story work. And then they finally get to the story like, oh my gosh, that 30 seconds at the end was really great, as is. You almost don't need to change much, as is, for that bit of the story. And you need to cut everything else up until that point. Because we don't need all that setup. 90% of the things you think you need to say, especially as a beginning comic, you really don't. So learn to cut out all the stuff. And a lot of it is tough because it's very personal to you. When you tell this story, talking about this person or that moment is very personal to you. And so I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's not bad. It's just delaying the funny. So there are two things you could do. One, just cut it. Because I guarantee most of the time you don't need what you think you need. Two, you can punch it up. And we're going to talk about all kinds of ways you can punch it up. But find ways to insert side comments, jokes. Find ways to make the setup funny. Don't feel like I have to drop all this setup so you get my joke, right? The joke, the story, the funny wants to come all the time. Sometimes, again, just how you present the setup, just talking about it in a way that brings the anxiety of the moment, the fear, the joy, the anger, right? Whatever that is, sometimes that's enough to punch it up. Sometimes that shapes it. Speeding up, get really excited, or this part is really important, so I need to frame it, as we actors call it. We need to put brackets of space around it so you know how important this moment is in my story, okay? But 90% of it just has to go. Now, especially after the brainstorming details, and I warned you at the end of that episode, a lot of the work you did in that episode we're going to throw out as far as the words we say. Here's the thing, though. Think about all that stuff you're going to cut before you get on stage. Think about all the things that make this story matter to you, that delay the funny, but it makes the story matter to you. Imagine all that stuff before you get on stage. The audience doesn't need to know that trivial stuff. And I say it's trivial, it might mean a lot to you. A lot of times I feel like I'm offending some people. I say that part of the story isn't important. They're like, it's important to me. It's important to me. But it's not important to the comedy bit that you're creating. We're creating stand-up comedy. And a lot of times, even if you're doing documentary type stuff, you're doing speeches at a graduation, you're the host, you're the headliner at a fundraiser, get to the motivational part, get to the funny part. All that setup, you really don't need as much as you think you need. You need to trust your audience or learn to find words in seconds that can replace those minutes of setup. Great example. I come from the opera world at one point, and I always loved the story of Puccini writing La Boheme. A lot of people remember Puccini's version of La Boheme because it's the economy. It's a shorter opera. It gets to the point, and mostly because of Act 3. The play and most versions of the opera had this entire act that go into the jealousy of Rodolfo. If you know the Broadway show Rent, that's based on La Boheme. It's the same story, Roger's character and Mimi, and there's this whole relationship, but Roger's a very jealous guy. Rodolfo's a very jealous guy. And there's this entire 20-minute act in the Roncavallos, the Gallo di Pagliacci, his version of the opera. This 20-minute act in the play. There's a 20-minute act, a fifth act in the play. It's way too long. And Puccini basically, in a matter of 30 seconds, has a little song of da 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 da. I mean, me is flirting with some boys at the square, and Roger just comes in and says, "Key Whitey." Who are those guys? Who are those? Right? In seconds, and then they move on. We reveal the important part that Roger Rodolfo is jealous, and to the point where Mimi is saying, "I gotta go. This is toxic," right? Toxic masculinity in the turn of the century, 1900s, when Bohème came out, right? So the important part there, 20 minutes crammed down to 30 seconds. And then we get back to the party of Act 2, La Bohème. 90% of your job right now is just getting rid of what you don't need and making room for what we're about to add. Magic threes, go back to Greek tragedy. Go back to Shakespeare. Go back to the Bible, the Trinity, right? The Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Humans, for some reason, from the dawn of time, love things in threes. I don't know if it has something to do with the triangle. The triangle is a symbol of so many things, good, bad, some very good things, some culty things, So that 3, 1, 2, 3. I want you to think of all your comedy routines as looking for patterns of 3. A lot of my younger students do comedy routines about their teachers. So I say, okay, find 3 teachers. What are the 3 teachers that did something memorable? Find those 3 things. 3 teachers, 3 subway stories. When I first started out, I did a lot of stories about the subway. I was new to New York City. I grew up in DC, and I started doing stories about the smells. It's a game. In order to survive the rat race of New York City, I make it into a game. Hey, what's that smell? Hey, what's that smell? Hey, what's that fluid on the seat? Hey, why is nobody on this train? Is it hot? No, that guy's stinky. I would have 3 stories of when entertainers came on. And then 3 stories of things I found in the subway, smells. And then I had a whole routine about fluids on the seats. I think that's Mountain Dew, not pee. I think that black, I thought it was Coke, but it actually is pee, but his pants were so dirty it turned black. And there's a whole story I used to do about that. Vacation stories. 3 different vacations, or 3 things that happened on the same vacation. 3 times you went to grandma's house and crazy things happened. 3 things that your parents do, 3 things that your siblings do, 3 things that happen at work, 3 things that happen at home, at school. If you go back to my brainstorming details, all the different things in the neighborhood, 3 things that happened, 3 things that happened in politics, 3 things that happened in sports, 3 things that happened in the movies and commercials, blah, 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 blah. After you have those 3 things, think of 3 things that go with each one of those things. So now you have 9 things, right? 3 things with subsets of 3 things. All of a sudden, that's a great 5-minute routine a lot of times. When you're trying to craft that perfect 5 minutes up front at this point in time, think of things in 3s. If you go back to being 10 years old, 5th grade, and you got those book reports from elementary school, they almost always had a 5-paragraph format they taught you to do. An opening paragraph, a closing paragraph. In the opening paragraph, you mentioned 3 things that you're going to use. Say, the theme of this book is blah, 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 blah. Here are the 3 things that happen in the book that prove it. And then you have a paragraph for each one of those things. And then under that paragraph, you have 3 things to justify those things. Another way to use Magic 3 is to create the ultimate crazy person, event, or thing by putting all those things into one person. So you have this crazy worst teacher of all time that does all the things that every teacher you ever had, all the things they didn't like go into this one person. And you start giving me those 3 things. Oh my gosh, this time the person did this, and then these 3 things happened. The other student did this, I said this, the teacher did this. We all got this weird detention. We all had to stay after school, whatever it was. It all goes into that same thing. Or 3 different subway stories. They go into one crazy subway ride. Think of all the things that ever happened on all your vacations and put them into one crazy, horrible vacation, right? On the same vacation, your flight got canceled, you missed your flight, you got stuck in the airport. When you finally get there at the beach, it's raining the whole time. The Airbnb, the walls are falling off the walls, and there's spiders, and there's bugs, and there's snakes, and there's all kinds of things, and you're going, and then you go to a place and you lost your wallet and you can't find your IDs, you have no money, you have to go to the consulate because you can't find your passport. All these things go into one crazy day, trip, etc. So you just take all those stories and put them to one crazy story. And whether you're doing stand-up comedy, creating original content for social media, creating TV shows, movies, books, short stories, poems, whatever it is, putting together a speech because you're the class president in school, or you're the boss at work and you got to do a speech. You're putting a presentation for a big sales pitch together. Think in terms of three, exaggerating the details. You've got your story, you've brainstormed ideas, you brainstormed details, you start to shape it a little bit, and you got this point where this happened, but what's the next level? What's the nth level? What's the craziest, the exponentially biggest place it could go? A lot of times a kid will say, I'm riding my bike and I almost broke my arm. So what would happen if you broke your arm? What happened if you broke your arm, you had to go to the doctor, and it led to all these things? And all of a sudden, you create a stand-up comedy routine that was based on the trauma of you hurting your arm in this bike accident. But now you created an entire story that is completely made up, but inspired by what could have happened. Or you took it to that next level, got that much more scary, it got that much more fun, it got that much more dramatic, that much more frustrating. You just took it to that next level. Because you always say, if this is true, this must be true. But if I kick it up a notch over here, then this must be true. And you end up just taking it to the next level. And you keep going and keep going and keep going until you get to that point where, okay, I took that too far and I'm losing the audience now. Either it's not believable because it's not true, it's too far away from the truth that it's not believable coming from me now, or you take it to a point where, okay, the audience is uncomfortable. And at some point, we like making the audience uncomfortable. That keeps them on the edge of their seats a little bit. But you took it to a point where it's beyond uncomfortable that they're turning on you. It's beyond uncomfortable to the point where they're angry for no reason, right? I'm not worried about the people who are angry because you said a joke and that one person found the need to say it was offensive, because they thought somebody might be offended by it somewhere, right? That's not what I'm talking about. That's ridiculous, right? But the whole audience is like, it's not funny anymore. It's just painful, right? So then you just pull it back 10%. You just pull it back. You take it to the extreme, and then when you can't justify that extreme, just pull it back 10%. Show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. Don't tell me about how this person is. Become them. Don't tell me what happened. Show me. Bring it. Show, don't tell. Have the conversation between you and the teacher, or become the teacher. See the classes? For real, for real, for real. That's why we did all that brainstorm detail stuff. We could get inside the mind and body of those people. I'm not talking about doing spot-on impersonations. I'm talking about doing a representative impersonation that just takes us there. Become that person. Become that horrible person at the restaurant, at the store, at the airport, on vacation, whatever it is. Show, don't tell. As a comic in a class, don't tell me what you're thinking about doing. Just do it, right? Just do it. And if it works, awesome. If it doesn't work, do something else. But don't feel the need to explain to me why you're doing something, because that doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It really doesn't matter why you're doing this thing, because if it doesn't work, it just doesn't work. Don't tell me what you were trying to do. Just say, that didn't work. Let me do something different. Or sometimes it's just a little tweak. So show, don't tell. Side comments. Make analogies. A throwaway line to the audience, blah, blah, blah. Even something as simple to the guy in the front row. You know what I mean. Sometimes it's crowd work things, but look for ways to add these side comments into your setups. Change history. There's a lot of ways we could change history. One, simply exaggerating what happened. A guy is riding his bike and he almost broke his arm. And I told the student, hey, what if you actually broke your arm? Where would that go? Where would your story go? If you actually broke your arm and you had to go to the doctor, It wasn't just, oh, mom patched me up and kissed my boo-boo. I actually had to go to the doctor. I got a cast. I couldn't play baseball for 3 months. I had a student the other day, high school kid, quite the truth teller, said, isn't that lying? And maybe yes. When we're doing comedy, that's okay. It's not about what really happened. Because we did the work and the brainstorm ideas and the brainstorm details, it's anchored in reality. And then we're going to take it someplace else. You can change the ending. What's the thing you could have said? What's the thing you wish you would have said? Sometimes remember the magic 3. Maybe the 3 things you could have said, the 3 things that would have been so much better, so much more profound, so much better ways to handle that situation. One of the best ways to write a punchline is to solve your problem. Solve the problem that never got solved. What's that thing you could have said? What's that thing you could have done? Or what's the thing that would have made it worse? You want to make it a little bit funnier. Your story just wants to be punched up a little bit better for the sake of stand-up comedy. This isn't about we're more interesting people now because we have these stories that are fake. That's not what we're doing. We're putting together a comedy routine with the character version of us, but it's still coming from this authentic place. So you can change the history. I wrote this book at a time when there was a lot coming out where comics all of a sudden weren't getting work at colleges or corporate events because all of a sudden they weren't hiring the raunchier comics for these events, right? You could blame the woke movement or whatever you want to call it, but they stopped hiring people that were too this or that for college environments. They decided they wanted it to be a safer space. I'm not going to pass judgment on that. But 2 things I want to add as you're creating your comedy routines, and I say this to a lot of young people that come to the adult class because they want to work dirty. They don't want to be clean. They want to be raunchy. And I have a couple things to say to you. One, if you're not Jim Norton or Lisa Lampanelli, who has a following and can fill a comedy club with just your name being a raunchy comic, most of the good paying jobs out there are for PG-13 comics, for clean comics, comics that work adult, that could perform at a high school, a college, a corporate event, and a club. Some of the squeaky clean comics, they come to New York City and they fail at the clubs. But a good PG-13 comic can still do well at the clubs. And here's the thing, you can always throw in an F-bomb and make it just a little more club-like. You can always just go a little crazy. Oh, F this, F that, right? But having that routine and a place where you could perform it at a college, at a high school, or even for younger folks, for family events, for churches, for synagogues. There's a lot of work out there. And I'm telling you, a lot of the work that's available to you before you're a big name is PG-13 comedy. So 1, it forces you, I think, to become a better writer because it's harder to work clean as a comic. It's harder. What happens is they hire these not so clean comics to work clean events, and then they complain about them not being great comics because those people aren't doing their best material. Their best material is this edgier stuff, and they're really good at it. Jim Norton. Would you ever hire somebody like Jim Norton to work at a church? And I'm sure Jim is great. I've never seen him more clean. I'm sure actually he's such a great comic. He could do it. But a lot of the guys from the clubs, a lot of the gals from the clubs, you ask them to work clean and it's just kind of as opposed to great story comics that could just pull back the curse words a little bit that they do in the club. And it's still a great story. It's still a great funny bit, right? So 1, challenge yourself to write clean. Cleanish, at least. PG-13. PG-13 is a great place. I can say there were 2 jokes in 20 plus years of doing comedy that I thought were really good jokes about the Holocaust that needed to be said. They were profound statements about what happened 80 years ago now. The problem is the thousands of really bad jokes that were just distasteful. There was nothing funny. And I actually fired somebody one time because they told a joke and they were working for me where they're going to go into schools and do improv comedy for kids. And I honestly felt if that joke was funny to them, I don't trust them around the children that I am going to entertain. I just don't. I didn't know what to do with that person. I said, if you think that's funny, I don't feel safe hiring you and paying you to go perform for kids. Don't be lazy. Have fun. Do the work. Go find the funny in your routines. This has been another episode of Comedy for Life. My name is Walt Frasier. And remember, if you want the world to smile at you, lead by example.